So I had a request to check out God the Supreme, the Almighty Supreme, a unique aspect of God which has been revealed in the Urantia book, and it has no other precedent in any of the spiritual teachings and understandings that I have seen in my lifetime. But one thing I will note about this book and these videos, sometimes I got a few comments that were saying, "Oh, this book is not good. This is an entry-level book." And the person did not want to provide me for any reason as to why they thought that. So there's not really too much that I can say about that. That's not a very valuable criticism to just say that it's not good. So if you're out there and you would like to say it's not good, please explain why, and then we can all learn from you. All right, let's see. The Almighty Supreme. If man recognized that his creators, his immediate supervisors, while being divine, were also finite. Now, this is the revelation here, in that one God of time and space was an evolving and non-absolute deity. Let's just stop there for a second. So there's an aspect of God that is evolving and non-absolute deity. That is the God of time and space. That also implies that there is a God which is existential, the opposite of that, and absolute, the opposite of that. So it's both one, because remember we're dealing with monotheism here, but there's aspects of God. God needs to divest himself in certain attributes to encompass everything. If God was just remaining as absolute, then time and space wouldn't be time and space. The time status would be absolute, and therefore it wouldn't have a linear time as we're experiencing. So it's a big vast universe out there, folks, and so there has to be all of these different ways that God can interact with that universe if there is to be other avenues and other aspects of creation. Let's continue on. Then would the inconsistencies of temporal inequalities cease to be profound religious paradoxes. So, what is an inconsistency of temporal inequality? Would be, well, this person was born with XYZ, this person wasn't. Now, that could be something that's genetic. That could be something that has to do with your environmental situations. Maybe you're born with a silver spoon or something like that. And somebody say, well, why would God do that? Maybe somebody was born with a disease. Geez, well, that's a paradox. If God's perfect, why was this person born with a disease? That's got to be some sort of favoritism. Well, if we understand the Almighty Supreme and that this is a evolving and non-absolute deity that is associated with time and space, then we will gain further. This paradox will go away. Okay? Cease. Go away. No longer would religious faith be prostituted to the promotion of social smugness in the fortunate, while serving only to encourage stoical resignation in the unfortunate victims of social deprivation. And it's not just social. I mean, it could be also, like I said, genetic. But so there's these, that could be a smug attitude that somebody would take. I'm the chosen one. Look at how I'm born. It could work both ways. Or somebody could look at these inconsistencies and deny God based on them. Or they could use that as saying, well, you're simply not the chosen one. You're a lesser individual and that sort of thing. But remember, we're wiping that stuff out, because any individual who chooses to have a relationship with deity and divinity, there's no limits on you, folks. The only limits are self-imposed. And the key there is not unbridled personal liberty, because you're choosing to have a relationship with deity and divinity. To somebody of that status, I could say there are no limits on you. But if somebody is vacillating on whether or not they want to have a relationship, I would say, oh, be careful, because if you go to a path and say, you're only limited, let's put it this way, into how much evil that you can do. But if you've already decided that you want to be on the path of deity and divinity, then there are no limits on you. And that's you. I'm talking anybody. There's no royal roads or favoritism in the divine, however it may appear that way. But we're learning, okay, well, what is this supreme? When viewing the exquisitely perfect spheres of Havona, remember that central universe, it is both reasonable and logical to believe they were made by a perfect, infinite, and absolute creator. But that same reason and logic would compel any honest being, when viewing the turmoil, imperfections, and inequities of Urantia, our planet, to conclude that your world had been made by and was managed by creators who were sub-absolute. So that's one way to look at it, or another would just say, oh, well, I'm just going to deny God altogether. But they are also not considering that there is this central universe created in perfection. So, pre-infinite, folks, and other than perfect. All right? And in fact, it teaches in other areas of the book that the God, the Supreme, is the most of deity that we can comprehend as time-space evolutionary origin beings. We have to grow in our spiritual understanding to comprehend the God that is created Havona. They're the same God, but like I said, it's just different aspects of it. Experiential growth implies creature-creator partnership, God and man in association. Growth is the earmark of experiential deity. We're always trying to live by what truth we can find today, wholly ready to call it falsehood tomorrow. Havona did not grow. Havona is and always has been, because the time-space status is absolute. It had no beginning and it had no ending. It is existential, like the everlasting gods who are its source. But growth characterizes the grand universe. So you have central universe, and then outside of it you have grand universe, which we're existing in right here and right now. Now, this is the way, folks, that we can both merge this Eastern philosophy of everything is this sort of non-duality, as they call it, and all is one and that sort of thing, right? Because that is what the central universe, it's all divine in nature. There is no evil there, okay? But we're dealing with a time-space universe here. So what we have to understand is that we're dealing with a relative reality. And as the book points out, nothing is more important than your status sphere. Because if not, then you would be driving to work and getting gas, and then are you your car? If there's non-duality, then you are your car. So that's why we kind of have to, but we have the experience that we're not our car, obviously. Duh. You're not me. You're sitting there watching this. I'm sitting there in my room doing this, okay? We have to understand that because of this experience, we could either just go so far deep down the rabbit hole of trying to force this Eastern mysticism into our relative reality right now, that we just become aloof, we become too abstract, we need to go into the cave and do meditation for 8 years because, there's no point in talking. For instance, if everything is non-duality, you wouldn't talk. You wouldn't call me brother because I'm you, and so forth. You wouldn't even talk. And so that's why they do go into the cave for 8 years. But for a lot of us, most of us, that's not just the practical way that we have to live and function. And in fact, we can be more of service if we are not an island, and that we come out of the monastery and relate to people and talk to them and teach them. And we have to understand that there is this relative reality. Now, one would say, well, then we have to just cast God aside completely if we're dealing with this relative reality, because God is purely only the absolute. No. That's where God the Supreme comes in. There is a God functioning here, a non-infinite, experiential. The Almighty Supreme is a living and evolving deity of power and personality. His present domain, the grand universe, is also a growing realm of power and personality. His destiny is perfection, but his present experience encompasses the elements of growth and incomplete status. Perfection is what we're all growing towards, and that's why the Supreme is our partner in this. As we make each choice, even a minute thing, let's say you're looking in that refrigerator and you see this animal flesh slaughter over here, a being had to suffer and die for that, and it's also going to give you heart disease and cancer. Or you see this delectable fruit, trapped light, this rainbow colored thing, no downside to it. a nice source of energy, and you make that choice, I'm going to go for the fruit, even just that one small choice. Maybe tomorrow you're going to go for the meat, but you made one small, higher natured choice. You evolve God the Supreme that much more, just that tiny bit. But when is the perfection going to be attained? Well, let's see. The Supreme Being functions primarily in the central universe as a spirit personality, secondarily in the grand universe as God the Almighty, a personality of power. The tertiary function of the Supreme in the master universe is now latent, existing only as an unknown mind potential. No one knows just what this third development of the Supreme Being will disclose. Some believe that when the super universes are settled in light and life, that's when this perfection is to take place, and not until then, we'll talk about that in a second, the Supreme will become functional from Uversa, the capital of the super universes, as the almighty and experiential sovereign of the grand universe, while expanding in power as the super almighty of the outer universes. Others speculate the third stage of supremacy will involve the third level of deity manifestation, but none of us really know. And this is a mighty messenger here, a mortal who has taken it from the level that we're at all the way up to the divine and passed through all these billion worlds of Havona and just attained so much light and knowledge. And they're saying that they don't even know. None of us really know. So, what does that mean, though, as far as settled in light and life? The super universes in settled light. Well, they have precedents of worlds that have been settled in light and life, like ours, which hasn't, but an evolving world which attained the level of peace on earth, goodwill amongst men and women, and that sort of thing. They call it settled in light and life, and it changes the spiritual economy of the world. It's just a much different, profound place. In fact, they said that we would think of it as being the heaven of our traditions if we were to experience a regular human planet. What ours has the potential to be, that is settled in light and life, we would consider it to be heaven of our traditions, because they even attain vision that they're able to see some of the spiritual beings that are closer to them. There's a Morancha temple, which is a Morancha material. So it's just profound, right? And that as a planet, it takes a long time for a planet to reach that stage. We could have probably already reached it, except we had went into sin and rebellion early on in our planet. Our planetary prince early on sent us into that direction. So as you can see, we're very far away from that. So imagine our planet attaining light and life. Imagine all of the other, right now they say 3.6 million inhabited worlds just in our local universe. Imagine all of them attain light and life. There are projected to be 10 million inhabited worlds in our local universe. So we haven't even, the planets that need to be settled in light and life haven't really even coalesced and formed from the material and matter that has been thrown off of the stars, which is how our scientists understand that planets are formed. So that matches up the Urantia book with the science of it, that this matter is thrown off of stars and so forth, and gravity coalesces it into these spheres, and if they're the right distance from the planet, then they can develop the right conditions from life. But then even when life arrives and is planted on the planet as single-celled organisms or protoplasm, it takes many, many years, many, I don't know, billions, I don't know how long exactly they detail it, but I forget, for those beings to evolve to human. Then those humans need to figure out their societies and cultures, and then have them settled in light and life. So we're talking about an eternity event that every single 700,000 universes gets settled in light in life here, folks. Not eternity, because it is time-space. Let's consider it eternity minus one. That's how long we're dealing with before this God, the Supreme, attains this level of perfection. And when God, the Supreme, attains this level, they don't exactly know. One theory put forth in the book is that we are then to become the creators of the outer space regions. Like we would function as our creator sun for these outer space regions that are just now, they're starting to detect some energies manifesting out there. And we're talking just way outside of the known universe and things like that. But it's going to change the whole entire. This universe age is about evolutionary. Okay, the first universe age was Havona, right? This central creation. But then this universe age is this evolutionary origin type thing, evolving not only the human mortals up to the level of deity and divinity, but then as they do, as each one, and look at that, folks, it seems like such a grand event, but you have a part of that. Just by saying which thing you want to choose from the refrigerator today. Are you going to make, and even if you only choose it once, that's fine. You access your higher nature. Or saying, hey, I don't want to smoke the cigarette today, or I don't want to, those minor choices, because we're dealing with perfection here. So those minor choices, folks, are evolving God the Supreme just that much more. And now, also, one thing in my own personal experience is I have a kinship. I feel a kinship with this God of the Supreme that is also evolving, that knows what it's like to be afflicted and that sort of thing. To know, it's closer to me in that, I don't know, because I'm not a perfect being. But it's all God the Father. So don't get wrapped up or trapped. If you want to just simplify it, if you just direct all of your spiritual energy towards God the Father, God the Mother, I don't care what you call it, the light of lights, or the source, the first source and center, anything like that. Direct your spiritual energy towards that, and it will all play out because you have a fragment of that being within you, the absolute eternal one, the Father being. It's not a fragment of the Almighty Supreme that is within you, the evolving one. It's the eternally perfect one, folks, that we have within us. The angels don't even have that. They don't even have a fragment of deity and perfection as we have it, and it's needed. They don't need it as much because they're not wallowing around here on this first rung of the ladder, trying to deal with what's right and what's wrong and so forth. So they don't need that perfect guide dwelling within them as is needed for us. So another thing I want to point out, folks, we were looking at the Supreme. This is just the introduction to this. This goes on. Look at Almighty God the Sevenfold, the Almighty Supreme Creators, Spirit Dominance. Here, look at this. Let's just look at this real quick. The time universes are not perfect. That is their destiny. The struggle for perfection pertains not only to the intellectual and spiritual levels, but also to the physical level of energy and mass. The settlement of the 7 super universes in light and life presupposes their attainment of physical stability. We don't have that. We have stars burning out and so forth. And it is conjectured that the final attainment of material equilibrium will signify the completed evolution of the physical control of the Almighty. In the early days of universe building, even the paradise creators are primarily concerned with material equilibrium. Hey, you got to have it. The pattern of local... So if somebody were to say, material, anything physical, that's just an idea or thought. It's not important. We can just transcend. No, this is a different... This isn't the absolute phase that we're dealing with here, folks. You have to go to work. There's a material distance that you need to travel. You can't just think yourself to it. Now, while you're traveling, you could be minded to the absolute, and you could have your mind on the spirit and that sort of thing. But if you don't prioritize your status sphere here, folks, you're going to be off in Eastern mysticism abstraction land, and you're not going to be able to synthesize. Now, I'm not saying the Eastern mysticism aren't correct and that they haven't hit on truth, because they certainly have. But they're almost skipping things, and it's just not practical. Remember, God is practical, and remember, nothing is more important than your status sphere. Your family's not going to be too happy if you go into Eastern mysticism abstraction land and tell them that, hey, I don't need to go to work today because starvation is the same thing as eating this delectable fruit. It's not. On an absolute level, yeah, it is. But remember, keep that in mind. We're dealing with material equilibrium. The pattern of a local universe takes shape not only as a result of the activities of power centers, but also because of the space presence of the creative spirit. And throughout these that's the local universe mother spirit. And throughout these early epochs of local universe building, the creator sun exhibits a little understood attribute of material control. So there's both working together, mother spirit and the creator sun spirit attribute material control, and does not leave his capital planet until the gross equilibrium of the local universe has been established. In the final analysis, all energy responds to mind. Look at this. All energy. So your thoughts are creative, you know? For instance, yeah, you have to drive to work. Well, it responds to mind in a way. You can come up with various ways that are going to be, maybe you could carpool if it's a really tough thing on you. And I believe it's even deeper to that, whereas you can manifest. The mind is creative here, folks. So let's say you said, that job is too far away. This is just a crude example. But if you said, hey, that job is far away, I'm going to associate myself with cosmic mind. I'm not saying that you can't use mind to manifest a new type of job or something like that for yourself, and change the kind of mental economy of things so that these things will manifest into your life. All energy responds to mind, and the physical controllers are the children of the mind god, who is the activator of paradise pattern. So you have to, all right, here's a great example. This is the last thing we'll go into for today. But so people, for instance, they say, well, we can't really eat cleanly because the whole entire planet is polluted. It's in the air, it's in every single lake and stream because of the fact that it's just in the air, right? So it rains, the pollution and things like that. So why it's not even worth trying to eat a vegetable diet, because ultimately you're still gaining traces of these toxins that are in the air due to our pollution. Okay, but now, an all-wise and all-knowing and loving creator would understand that, and it would realize that it's not your fault. So these beings, the master physical controllers, they won't penalize somebody for doing their best on a world that's isolated, rebellious in time and space. These beings are able to say, well, that's the best he's got. Yeah, it's polluted fruit, but it's the best he's got. So are we going to penalize him for the mistakes that they've made, the greedy capitalists have made for generations and generations? And, are we going to penalize this person who's really trying to find God and really trying to have a mind of perfect poise and a body of clean habits and keep them from experiencing something? No, that wouldn't be the case. So they're just able to take whatever that toxin is, but they can only meet you where you're willing to go. They're not going to change if you say, well, let's do that with meat. Let's do that with, processed meat, which we know cause cancer. Let's have the master physical controllers I'm going to simply just mentally go around the fact that that creates cancer. Well, no, you're not making your best choice in that situation. You're not even trying to attempt to make your best choice there. You're just going for the cancer thing because it's easy and it tastes good. So there's no arbitrary favor. Why would the master physical controllers manipulate what type of material you're taking into your body if you are utilizing your lower nature to make that choice? But it's when you make your higher natured choice that you're not going to be penalized. For instance, let's say you can't afford organic and you just want to buy regular things, but Monsanto had already done their business in there, and those things are not the ideal ones as if you grew them yourself from your own organic soil. But you're still making your best choice. You're not going to be penalized for that if you can't afford it, and so forth and so on. So it's all about meeting you where you're at with that. But it's an understanding that knows where you're at, because you're talking about all wise creators, all wise, all loving, all merciful, but not so merciful that they're going to change the definition of evil for you and say, no, cancer is now good just because you really love cancer. You're not going to manipulate, that's that unbridled personal liberty that Lucifer taught. Okay, anyways, a little bit about God the Supreme. Thanks again, folks, for liking, subscribing. I really appreciate everybody's effort. I see a lot of powerhouses, lighthouses, pioneers out there, and that's what you all are. You all have this potential within you. Don't get caught up in the ideas, folks. Like I said, just boil it down, simplify it. Send your spiritual energy to the all-wise, all-loving creator, father, parent. Doesn't matter what religion you are, and it will all manifest into positivity as you pursue your course into eternity, walking in the light. All right, thanks again.